Hello, how you doing people? This is Neo. I'm an ESL student studying English literature and I just want to share the things I study with people who are interested in English or they are themselves are student like me. And in this video, which is my first video, I'm gonna study Plato as the first systematic literary critic, the one who castigated and criticized poetry and didn't like poets at all. We're gonna get to that, why he doesn't like poets and poetry. And the book I'm reading is Literary Criticism from Plato to Present, an Introduction by M.A.R. Habib. There is another volume of this book which has the same name, same title, but that book is thick and he explained things in detail, more sophisticated way. And that book contains approximately 700 pages. Yeah, but this one does the job, so don't worry. And I recommend you all, if you study English literature, get this book, PDF, I don't know, and study it. Yeah, because literary criticism is one of the most important thing, in my opinion, in whole humanities. Humanity is a major. So let's get down with Plato. I'm gonna read the paragraphs and then maybe I say something, talk about it, my opinions, thoughts. But in general, I just study and read out loud the paragraphs. And then we're gonna discuss it a little bit in detail. So let's do it. It is wisely acknowledged that the Greek philosopher Plato laid the foundations of Western philosophy. The mathematician and philosopher A.N. Whitehead stated that Western philosophy is a series of footnotes to Plato, who indeed gave initial formulation to the most fundamental questions. How can we define goodness and virtue? How do we arrive at truth and knowledge? What is the connection between soul and body? What is the ideal political state? Of what use are literature and the arts? What is the nature of language? Plato's answers to these questions are still disputed, yet the questions themselves have endured. So as you can see, Plato was a philosopher, and this is a typical questions that philosophers ask. Let's get down to the next paragraph. At the age of 20, like many other young men in Athens, Plato fell under the spell of the controversial thinker and teacher Socrates. And Socrates was Plato's teacher, kind of, and Plato, in his works and canons, by canons I mean books, usually his main speaker is Socrates. It's a dialectic form. You know, there are dialogues. As Socrates says something, another one says something, and then they come with a conclusion, an inferred conclusion, which then we can discuss it in syllogism. I think the word was syllogism, yes, which Aristotle talks about it, and we're gonna get to that. So, yeah. Where was it? Plato fell under the spell of the controversial thinker and teacher Socrates. In a story later to be recounted in Plato's Apology, Socrates had been hailed by the oracle at the Delphi as the wisest man alive. He devoted his life to pursuit of knowledge, wisdom, and virtue, using a dialectical method of question and answer, as we mentioned. He would often arouse hostility by deflating the pretensions of those who claimed to be wise and who professed to teach. A wide range of people, including rhetoricians, poets, politicians, and artisans, felt the razor edge of his intellect, which undermined controversial views of goodness and truth. Eventually, he was tried on a charge of impiety and condemned to death in 399 BC. After the death of his revered master, Plato eventually founded an academy in Athens. As far as I know, academy was the name of a garden which Plato used to teach there, as far as I know. So yeah, this the method, the dialectical method of questions and answer is like this dialectic thing is like you say something, not just saying, you state, you theorize something, then you come up, or there is an thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. This is like a dialectic in a nutshell, in a oversimplified version. If you wanted to know dialectic, you should study the Ontology of the Spirit by Hegel. A really, really hard book to study, really hard book to study. I myself cannot study that because I cannot understand a word of it. But there are ways to study. But you don't need, as a English major student, you do not need to study that per se. Necessity. That's not a necessity. Yeah. So let's study another paragraph, shall we? Most of Plato's philosophy is expounded in dialogue form, using a dialectical method of pursuing a truth by systematic questioning of received ideas and opinions. Dialectic, here in parenthesis, derives from the Greek dialogomai, something like that, I'm not sure, to converse. Socrates is usually cast as the main speaker. The canon attributed to Plato includes 35 dialogues and 13 letters. The early dialogues are devoted to Plato, are devoted to exploring and defining concepts such as virtue, temperance, courage, piety, and justice. The major dialogues of Plato's middle period, Gorgias, Apology, Phaedo, Symposium, Republic, move into the realms of epistemology, theory of knowledge, metaphysics, political theory, and the arts. What unifies these various concerns is Plato's renowned theory of forms. Now, this is important, which sees the familiar world of objects which surrounds us and which we perceive through our senses as not independent or real, but as dependent upon another world, the realm of pure forms or ideas, which can be known only by reason and not, that's the line, and not by our bodily sense perceptions. Plato says that the qualities of any object in the physical world are derived from ideal forms. For example, an object in the physical world is beautiful because it partakes of the ideal form of beauty which exists in the higher realm. And so with tallness, equality, or goodness, which Plato sees as the highest of the forms. The connection between the two realms can best be illustrated using examples from geometry. Any triangle or square that we construct using physical instruments is bound to be imperfect. At most, it can merely approximate the ideal triangle, which is perfect and which is perceived not by the senses but by reason. The ideal triangle is not a physical object. Now that's the neat part. But a concept, an idea, a form. So let's paraphrase it like that. Plato is an idealist. And in his idealistic world, which is a world separated from us, from our world that we can understand and make sense of it, everything there lives in its absolute form or ideals. As the example here, the triangle example, you can come up with another example, like imagine a chair or a bed. The idea of bed lives and exists in that idealistic world, the absolute bed or chair. But when the carpenter constructs, manufactures that bed, build the bed is not the bed that we had in mind. The bed is not the same, absolute and pure as the idea of the bed. So, the bed has been deteriorized in its physical form, in the world of physics, our world. From what? From where? From that idealistic world. It is descended. And then we have painter, for example. The painter itself has an idea of that painting the bed. But the idea of that painted bed is something, and the actual result is something else. Maybe it is highly close and precise, but it's not the same from Plato's point of view. Okay? So again, we have the bed, the physical bed, which has been descended from the idealistic world, and now we have the painted bed, which has been again descended from that physical form, which was built by the carpenter. So, two level of deterioration. Two level. This is what he's talking about, as far as I can understand or make sense of it. Yeah. Let's read the 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph. According to Plato, the world of forms, being changeless and eternal, alone constitutes reality. See? And the word that he's talking about is changeless, is eternal, because it's absolute, because it's perfect. It is the world of essences, unity, and universality, whereas the physical world is characterized by perpetual change and decay. See? Our world is constantly changing and decaying, getting destroyed and reconstructed again. Mere existence, as opposed to essence, multiplicity, and particularity. A central function of the theory of form is to unify groups of objects or concepts in the world by treating them as belonging to a class. That's why Plato is called first systematic critic. Yes, first systematic critic. That is the reason. Because the function of the theory of form, I'm reading it again, is to unify groups of objects or concepts in the world by treating them as belonging to a class. This is important, guys. By referring them back to a common essence and thereby making sense of our innumerably diverse experience. So, the thing that he's saying, is talking here, is that ideal thing, or imagine the bed, okay? That ideal, the idea of bed, the absolute bed. We cannot understand that with our senses, because we're from this stupid, useless world of physics. So we deteriorize that idea in a way that we can make sense of it. This filter, this process kills that absolute, kills that ideal. And let's see what else he says. A renowned expression of Plato's theory occurs in the seventh, next page, book of the Republic, one of the most famous book of Plato, or in philosophy, in classic philosophy, Republic, where he recounts the myth of the cave. Yeah, the myth of the cave is one of the popular and famous allegories when it comes into philosophy and literature. They also call it the allegory of the cave. So let me read it, then I can talk about it a little bit. Where people have lived all their lives watching shadows of reality cast by a fire, with their backs to the true light of the sun. Plato makes it clear that the cave in which men are imprisoned represents the physical world, and that the journey toward the light is the soul's ascension. See, soul's ascension to the world of forms. The soul goes up. It tries to fly to that idealistic world. If they leave the cave, they go and see the real world, not just the shadow of things, of actual things. With that bit which carpenter builds it, it's the shadow. It's a counterfeit of the real idealistic idea of the bed. So Plato makes it clear that the cave in which men are imprisoned represents the physical world, and that the journey toward the light is the soul's ascension to the world of forms. In his later dialogues, Plato himself severely questioned the theory of forms. Of course he does that. So far, let's just kind of recap and review what we studied. Well, we now know that Plato was an idealist who believed that there are two words. One, an idealistic word, a word of forms, that things are their absolutes, 100%. Ideas, by form, he means ideas. Ideas, forms, they're equal. And then we have our word, a word which ideas and forms are descended, are not the same. They're changed, they're deteriorized. And he comes with this explanation of the allegory of the cave. There are a bunch of people in the cave, and they're facing the wall. The entrance is the other way, is the opposite way. So whenever the sun rises, they see shadows of real things, like for example, a shadow of a tree or something. I don't know how, but that's the theory. It doesn't matter. And they only see the shadows, not the real thing. But suddenly one of them releases himself and goes out, and he sees the real thing. Now he's ascended to the idealistic world. How? We don't know. This is an allegory. I myself don't know. If you know, let me know in the comment. And he goes there and he sees the real deal, real thing, not just a shadow. That's all what he was trying to say. That's all we read so far. So, I think that's enough, because let that sink in and think about it. Maybe Google it, or if you have the book, read it for yourself. I was trying to study, to repeat and review these things. I've read these things like a year ago, and now I kind of feel that I'm forgetting this stuff. I hope this video was useful, helpful, and I try to at least encourage and persuade people to study literary criticism, because in a world of passive people, that criticism and being critical is the most important thing that you can achieve. One of the most important things, at least in my book. So, I hope you enjoyed it. Bye for now.